Awesome. Well, hi guys, thanks for joining us today. My name is Pierre Hery, and I'm a product specialist with Aviva Select California. And I'm joined today by our training coordinator, Kyle Escamilla, and my coworker, Alcanza Cusa, who is also a product specialist. So in this 30-minute webinar or so, we're going to be talking about upgrading Aviva InTouch applications. And a quick note before we start here, my coworker Tim Brost will be hosting a similar webinar on upgrading system platform, I believe in July. So Alcanza or Kyle, if you guys can put the link in the chat to that webinar, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll slip it in real quick.
Thank you. So brief note on the agenda today. So the bulk of this webinar will be this PowerPoint presentation, where I will start by, sort of setting the stage for the webinar with an introduction, and then we will dive into the topic of the day, where I'm going to try to thoroughly discuss some key considerations to make when upgrading an InTouch application. And then I will dive into the demo portion of this webinar and walk you guys through a practical upgrade. And depending on time, I might host a Q&A session at the end, but there's a lot of us here. So what I encourage you guys to do instead is ask questions in the chat as we go, and my coworker Alcanza will answer them. That way I can get a few minutes back for the main presentation, and hopefully we can end this webinar on time. But depending on time, I may also host a Q&A at the end. So let me give you guys, a brief background on who we are for those of you that aren't familiar with us. So Aviva is a world leader in industrial software. We essentially strive to be a one-stop shop for all of you guys and, provide your operational software to, fulfill your needs and address your pain points. So we offer a huge range of solutions, and that goes from SCADA platforms to engineering tools, data analytics software, and asset management products, etc. And as you can see with, the figures on this slide here, we cast a pretty wide net with our international network of employees and partners. And we also have, a very large customer base, and these companies all use our expertise and our products to digitally transform their operations. And you can see some ROI examples from successful partnerships with Aviva on the right side on this slide. So you might wonder about, kind of the interplay of Aviva and Aviva Select California, and that's who we are on this call here. We're Aviva Select California. We used to be called Wonderware California, but Wonderware and Aviva joined forces recently, and we rebranded as Aviva Select California, even though, it's the same team and the same people as Wonderware California. So Aviva Select California is essentially the exclusive Aviva branch for the California territory. So really, we're your local point of contact for anything and everything Aviva related. We've been around since 1992, and we provide everything from, software training to free workshops to webinars like the one you're in right now. We provide technical support. We also have a YouTube channel as well that we maintain regularly. We also have a strong network of system integrators all over California that we can tap into if any of you guys need engineering implementation help. So really the bottom line here is that we're here to provide support, right? So support for everything and anything Aviva and Wonderware related. All right, so, I understand that by virtue of you guys being here in the first place, you're most likely already InTouch users, or, at the very least, you're somewhat familiar with InTouch. But, for the sake of thoroughness and to make sure that I don't lose anyone who might not be, I'll just do a quick introduction of the platform. So remember what I said about our team rebranding from Wonderware to Aviva Select California? Well, during this transition, we rebranded our core SCADA platform from Wonderware to Aviva InTouch. So Aviva InTouch is the new name for Wonderware, for those of you that are familiar with the Wonderware platform. So with that being said, if you're still new to the product, I'm going to explain what Aviva InTouch is. So Aviva InTouch essentially is a SCADA platform. It's the world's most popular HMI software, as proven by the fact that it runs in, I believe, a third of the world's plants. So it's all over the place. And you can use InTouch to essentially, create a digital representation of your industrial process. So the InTouch application lets you visualize and control elements of your process. And you can also create historical records of your operation and alert your personnel of any action items as needed. So all of this in order to make better business decisions, improve your operator response times, lower costs, and reduce risks. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the software itself because the focus of this webinar is upgrading it. But before we dive into the upgrading, I wanted to share some terminology definitions here. So there's several different types of InTouch applications that are going to be relevant to this discussion. And the first one is a standalone InTouch application. So this is essentially your classic InTouch version that is, developed and maintained pretty much entirely from the InTouch development environment. So it's meant to function in a standalone fashion. And this is in contrast to the second flavor of InTouch application types, which is managed InTouch applications. So the managed applications are derived from system platform objects. And if you didn't know, system platform is another SCADA platform that we offer that enables you to use InTouch as the HMI visualization component of system platform. But the difference with managed applications is that the back-end data management of these InTouch applications are controlled and managed by system platform itself. So they work a little differently than the standalone applications. And, while this is the case, right, the visualization capabilities and the InTouch development environments for the HMI screens are the same. It's just the back-end data management that changes. We also have modern InTouch applications. And these are, a subset of standalone application types. They were available, back in the day between InTouch versions, I believe 2014 R2 to version 2017 U3. And they're a little different from the standalone applications because that's when we started supporting vector-based industrial graphics, which I'll talk about later, as well as .NET client controls, as well as the legacy symbols of Orchestra graphics. And I'll explain what those are later. Then we also have published InTouch applications. And these are versions of managed applications that are converted to a file-based format. And we use them to distribute the application to other nodes as needed. And to wrap up the terminologies here, in this webinar, I might throw around the words upgrade and migrate a little interchangeably. And to be clear, I'm using them to refer to the modernization of an InTouch application, right? So going from an older version to a new version. But there is technically a difference in their definitions. Upgrading refers to, installing a new version of InTouch on a computer that already has a previous version. So you're removing the old version in the process. And this is what we call an in-place upgrade. Migrating, on the other hand, refers to converting applications created with older versions of InTouch to the current version. So again, I might use them a little interchangeably here because I'm referring to, going from an old version of InTouch to a new version of InTouch, whether that's an in-place upgrade or a migration. But there is a technical definition between them, or a technical difference in their definition, excuse me. So let's talk a little bit about the why, right? Why would you want to upgrade your InTouch application? Some of these, points might be obvious, but some might not be. So let's go over some of the compelling reasons why you might want to upgrade your InTouch application. So first, older computers just might start to malfunction, right? And of course, if they malfunction, that could impact the performance of the application. So it's tough sometimes, finding replacement parts for old computers, if they're outdated and the original manufacturer doesn't support them anymore. So it can be hard getting up to date from a hardware perspective. So it's crucial to upgrade if you don't want any hiccups in your operation from a hardware limitation standpoint. There's another compelling reason to upgrade InTouch, and that is the fact that InTouch is a constantly improving product, right? So every major release and patch that we provide to you offers bug fixes to improve your application's performance. And you'll also be able to take advantage of the latest features as they're released, because we're always adding new features and improving the product. And these can include, at least with the latest release, you have an improved InTouch web client, and you also have a new feature like InTouch workspaces, which is exclusive for 2023. And in addition, there's certain licensing perks. So with 2023 and going through Flex, you have the ability to scale in an unlimited fashion because you have unlimited InTouch tags and clients, which wasn't the case before. So you have every incentive to upgrade and move forward and stay up to date with the latest versions. We know also that cybersecurity is of huge importance to you guys. So we want to make sure that your data is secure through us. So cybersecurity standards are constantly evolving, and we're incorporating these additions into our product release. So by upgrading, you'll take advantage of all these security enhancements, such as improved communication encryption. A couple more triggers for updates, right, is the end of operating system lifestyle support. So if you can't get Microsoft support for some of your applications that run on older operating systems, you might want to modernize your application. And following that logic, the end of Aviva product support lifecycle is another reason to upgrade, right? There's a reason that many of you have support contracts with us, and that's because if issues arise, right, and you need to call upon the experts to help you as quickly as possible. If those experts can't help you because you have a product version that isn't supported anymore, you're going to have a hard time. Not to mention that the support contract through us entitles you to receive the latest version of the software for free anyway. All right, so now let's dive into the meat of the discussion, which is upgrading InTouch applications. So the very first thing I would recommend doing is, sort of doing your due diligence with what I call the flight pre-checks. So you'll probably already have done most of these when you actually purchase the new software and you have a plan in place to upgrade. But it's a good idea to double check, all of these bullet points before you actually do the upgrade. So first and foremost, I would say you want to review your InTouch application to make sure that it's in a good state. If you have things like, missing data points, broken HMI screens, malfunctioning alarms, right? It's probably a good idea to rectify those issues before you upgrade, because, upgrading your application isn't necessarily going to fix them, right? You're just going to duplicate or even magnify the problems in the new software. And along with this, I would also test to make sure that the InTouch application can be opened on another machine to make sure that it's not corrupted or anything. And the next big check that I would make, which is often overlooked, is third-party add-ons. If you're using third-party add-ons or .NET controls or ActiveX controls, these features aren't necessarily maintained by Aviva. And there's no guarantee from us that they're going to be supported with the new software. So I would recommend confirming that these add-ons will work as you expect in the new software. And if they don't, you want to have some sort of contingency plan in place to replace them, right, in a way that will work with the latest Aviva software, whether that's downloading the new versions of those third-party add-ons or finding a third-party add-on that is compatible with the latest version of Aviva. And of course, you also want to make sure that the operating system is compatible with the new InTouch software, whether or not that's the same machine as the one you've been using with the old software or a new machine. And along with InTouch compatibility itself, you want to check the compatibility of your communication drivers, because you're probably also upgrading your communication drivers along with InTouch. So you want to make sure that they're going to be working with the new controllers that you have. And otherwise, if your communication drivers aren't compatible, your upgraded InTouch application might not work with your controllers as expected, right? So that's something you want to check for sure. And, of course, if your environment is virtualized, you want to apply all these considerations to your virtual environment if you're using that instead of a base machine. And luckily, Aviva provides what we call technology matrices, which I provided the link for here, but we can also send it in the chat. But you can basically reference these to make sure that your operating system and hardware are compatible with a specific Aviva InTouch version. The last sort of, pre-flight check that I would recommend as a best practice is verifying licensing. So without the proper licensing, right, your new InTouch application won't run properly, if at all. So you want to make sure that not only did you purchase the right InTouch license, but you've also activated it correctly on the target machine. And depending on how far ahead you jump in InTouch versions, you might have been using our old .lic licensing files. And the current versions use .xml files that we activate using the Aviva Enterprise License Manager. Versions between, I think they were actually up to 2014 R2 are the ones that use the .lic licensing model. So if you're going from that system to .xml, you want to be aware of how the activation changes, right? Which isn't overly complicated, it's just something to be aware of. And some licensing parameters to consider as well is which mode you want to set up your licensing server in. And this is going to depend on your architecture, and you have to ask yourself some questions like, how many different InTouch applications are you upgrading? Are they in redundant pairs? Are they standalone or managed, right? These are all questions to ask yourself because these are factors that will come into play in how you're going to set up your license server. So speaking of migration version jumps, right, it's important to be aware of just how far ahead you can go at one time. In the README of each product installation package, you're going to find a matrix like the one that I put in the slide here. And this matrix will show you just how far ahead you can either do an in-place upgrade or a migration, because you can't, just jump ahead from any version to the next. Sometimes you need to do a two-step process with an intermediary upgrade in between. So this matrix here is taken from the 2023 README. So it shows you how far ahead you can do, a direct upgrade or a migration to Aviva InTouch 2023. So if you have to upgrade or migrate from a version that has an N in the cell in the matrix, the modernization will require two steps. You'll first need to upgrade or migrate to a version that it can jump to, and then subsequently do it again from that intermediary version to version 2023. So it'll require two steps, and you can reference this matrix to find out if that applies to you. So, as is usually the case for, really any sort of software upgrade, you want to do your due diligence and take backups before you do the actual upgrade. And, this is mainly for peace of mind because the upgrade process is fairly robust and straightforward, but you never know what can happen when you upgrade, right? Because things out of your control, like your computer shutting down from loss of power, for example, these issues can lead to, compromised upgrades or incomplete upgrades. So it's important to save your current work and take a snapshot so you don't lose anything in the process. Now, there's 2 or 3 types of backups that I would recommend depending on your InTouch application type. And I'll actually show you guys how to take these backups during the demo portion of the webinar at the end here. And the first one is the InTouch application itself. So you can take a backup of it and you want to save it somewhere handy for reference if you need it, probably on your desktop or wherever you can easily access it. The second one is the communication driver configuration in the OCMC, which is the new name for the SMC, the System Management Console. And this one is, in my experience, often overlooked, but I think it's important because, although the Aviva communication drivers are easy to configure, it's really helpful to take a snapshot of your existing settings. That way you can, duplicate them easily in your new environment. And, this includes information like, the PLC IP address, your port configurations, your tag addresses, so on and so forth. And those are all things that you don't necessarily want to commit to memorization or have to reconfigure, right? So you can take a snapshot of them and then import them in your new environment. And I'll show you guys how to do that. And those two types of backups are true for all InTouch application types. But what if you have a managed InTouch application? So remember that the managed InTouch application type, right, is for Aviva system platform managed InTouch applications. So if this is your situation, I would also recommend taking a backup of the system platform Galaxy itself. And you can do that through what we call cabinet files. So again, I'll show you how to do that in the demo. But what this will do is this will take a snapshot of your Galaxy configuration and save it, because the way that your Galaxy is configured is going to impact the back-end management of your InTouch application, if it's a managed application type. So when it comes to the upgrade and migration methodology, right, you have several methods at your disposal. And when you do an in-place upgrade, which, right, remember, it's installing the new InTouch version on a computer that already has a previous version. That one's pretty easy, and all you need to do is run the setup.exe executable and follow the prompts. So this executable is provided to you in the installation package. All you need to do is run the setup and it will do the in-place upgrade. So you want to keep in mind, though, that if you're using managed InTouch applications with industrial graphics from application server 3.1 SP3 or earlier, you're going to have to run this utility called the industrial graphics analysis and repair utility before installing the new application server. And this is to ensure that, all issues that are reported by the utility are addressed so that you fix them and don't run into any problems. When it comes to migrating older applications, and remember, the term migration refers to converting an older application to a new one. So there's a technical difference between that and an in-place upgrade. You have two methods at your disposal. And the first one I would say is the easiest one, and that's the one that I'm going to be demoing later today here. And it really just involves, installing the new software and opening the old application in the new application manager. And what this will do is it will automatically migrate your application and convert the resolution for you. It's really easy and just involves a couple steps. And again, I'll demo this. But there is a second option, and that is using what we call the package files, the .aapkg files. And what you do here is you export your old applications into these package files. And then once you've installed your new software, you can import them manually into the new environment. So it's a second option. So let's talk a little bit about some specific upgrading scenarios here, such as, what if you have redundant or parallel nodes? Now, at minimum, right, you can do what's called an in-place upgrade, which I mentioned before, which is the upgrading of an InTouch application on a single node. But this method has certain weaknesses, as I'm sure some of you have experienced before. You have to consider the timing of your upgrade because it can potentially take down your operation, right? Because essentially you're disabling the only active InTouch node during the upgrading process. So it will require you to, schedule strategically during certain production breaks because it'll take down your operation. And, this can be really difficult to do if you have an operation that's running 24/7, 365 days a year. You'll be at the mercy of the upgrade time, which will depend on the size of your application. So if you have a large application, that could potentially take down, your production for a little bit of time. The larger the application, right, the longer it will take down your operation. But the positive to this single node in place upgrade is that it doesn't require any additional hardware versus the alternative that does require additional hardware. And the alternative is the parallel upgrade scheme. And put simply, right, the parallel upgrade is when you have two active nodes that are side by side and you migrate one at a time, such that you always have one active node while you're migrating the disabled migrating node, right? So while you're upgrading one, you still have one that's active during the first one's migration process. And this addresses the plant downtime issue that the single node upgrade has, because there is a point where the operation goes down because you always have one active node that's working properly. And so this is ideal for situations where the hardware and operating system also need upgrading, because then you can keep the old node active while you upgrade the hardware of the new machine as well as the software on the new machine. And once the migration is complete, you can then switch over to the new one, right, without any production break. And I'd say this is also helpful because, you know, it gives you an opportunity to compare the old and new InTouch applications side by side. And so, you know, as a result, I find these pros personally to performing the parallel upgrades outweigh the cons. So I personally recommend taking this approach, even though it requires additional hardware. But, you know, of course, this is on a case-by-case basis, and there isn't really a single right answer. It's going to depend on your specific situation. So I encourage you guys to think about the impacts of your decision carefully and find the option that works for you best. So during the upgrade process, you might choose to convert the InTouch application type. So keep in mind that not all application conversion types are possible, right? But for example, you might want to convert from a managed InTouch application to a standalone InTouch application. Not a lot of customers know that you can do this. And this can be useful if you're, you know, moving away from system platform, right? A managed InTouch application, and you want your tags to be managed by InTouch entirely in a standalone InTouch application fashion. So in order to do this, you're going to need to use what we call the db dump and db load functions. So db dump essentially exports the tag name dictionary, and db load imports it. So once you've done your db dump, you can also publish your InTouch application and export all the windows. And those three steps, db dump, publishing the InTouch application, and exporting the windows, will give you all the required content that you need to then port over to a fully functional standalone application. So at that point, you can import all this information into your standalone application via db load, and also importing the windows and the published InTouch application. And so this will convert your application from managed to standalone. So we're almost done here with the presentation, but to wrap this up, I just wanted to say that, you know, quick note on industrial graphics. So for those of you that don't know, industrial graphics are basically Aviva's modern graphics library, and they were formerly known as Orchestra graphics, if you were familiar with those, which were available in, I believe, InTouch version 2014 R2 and earlier. So by virtue of industrial graphics being, you know, a fairly recent addition, you might be put in a position where you need to convert an application that, you know, predates industrial graphics into an application version that does use industrial graphics. For example, if you're going from InTouch version 2012 to 2020 or 2023, it will go from Orchestra graphics to industrial graphics. So you want to be aware of those considerations. And so I'll show you guys how to do the conversion. It's pretty straightforward, and I'll show you guys during the demo portion of this webinar. And another point that, you know, I wanted to quickly mention here is that the InTouch web client does require you to convert to industrial graphics. So if you upgrade to 2023, for example, and you want to use this web client, you will need to convert your graphics. So that's something to consider as well, is it might actually be a requirement for you, depending on your InTouch version. All right, so that is it for the presentation. So now I'm going to dive into the demo. So let me go ahead and switch my screen here. Kyle, can you see SkyTap right now?
Yes, you can see it.
Awesome, thank you, Alfonso. Sure. So now I'll show you guys how to, oh, sorry, I guess we lost it here. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to show you guys how to do an upgrade, right? So remember what I said, the first step in the upgrade is taking backups, right? So the first backup that I would take is the InTouch application backup. And actually, you know, with 2023, this is pretty new. Inside the InTouch application manager, it's included as an optional step when you do the migration process. So I'll show you guys what I mean by that, and I'll do it third after the other two backups. So the first backup that I'm going to show you guys is the OCMC driver configuration backup. So if I open the OCMC, which is, again, the new name for the SMC, which was the System Management Console, what you can do is you can take a snapshot of your driver configuration. So what I'm doing right now is I am expanding my drivers, right? Because these are the drivers that are feeding InTouch, that are grabbing data from the PLCs and your controllers and, you know, bringing the tag data into InTouch. And so what I can do is I can take a look at, for example, this Modbus TCP driver right here. And you can see I have a driver that is configured here with the IP address, as well as topic device groups and device items. So these are all things that, you know, I don't want to necessarily have to re-enter right inside my new environment. So what I can do is I can take a snapshot of it. So if I right click on configuration, you'll see a few options. You'll see that I can archive the configuration set. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to call this configuration set test, for example, and then click on archive. And this will save the configuration step or the configuration set in here. It's a little hard to find because you got to go to program data, which is hidden for a lot of you guys. But then you go inside of program data. Sorry, not Wonderware. It's program data. Actually, yes, it is Wonderware. OI server. Go to this folder, and then you have your different driver folders. So what we did is we did a configure archive of the MBTCP driver. So click on that. And then you'll see that I have my test configuration set right here. So it will save your configuration set. And at that point, what I could do is I can, you know, for example, clear this configuration set or delete it. Right. So now I don't have anything under configuration. I cleared it. So this is how, you know, after you install your new InTouch software and open the new OCMC console, this is how it will be, right? It'll be blank. What I could do is I could right click on it, and then I can click on use configuration set and then select the test one. That way I can import my driver configuration. So again, it's just an easy way to export and import these settings right here, so you don't have to commit them to memory or, you know, have to re-enter them from scratch. The second backup that you could do is, remember, for managed InTouch applications, those are managed by system platform. So what you can do is you can actually go to Galaxy Database Manager if you're using this InTouch application type. Right click on your Galaxy and then click on backup and save it on, you know, the desktop, for example. And this will save a .cab cabinet file of the Galaxy on your desktop, which is, you know, a snapshot of the Galaxy configuration. That way, you know, if you're upgrading a managed InTouch application, you can go ahead and use this cabinet file and, you know, pick up right where you left off with the Galaxy configuration settings. So let's give it a second while it does this. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you guys the migration of InTouch itself. And so to do that, you want to go inside of the InTouch application manager. Okay, so I'm working with InTouch 2023. So this interface might look different to you guys if you're using an older version. But with 2023, the way that this works is you go to Tools and then Find. And I'm going to look on my desktop here because I have my folder for the old application on the desktop, and it's going to find the application, which is called Tag Test. I have it on my desktop here, so I just pointed to the desktop and found it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to import it. So to do that, I'm going to just open Window Maker, and this is the application migration dialog box. And you can see that I can choose to automatically convert the application resolution if this applies to you. And remember what I said about the backup, right? It's an option in this dialog box. So you don't actually need to do the backup before. It'll show up as an option in this dialog box and allow you to do it during this process. So I'm going to make sure that this is checked to take a backup of the old InTouch application before I do the actual migration. And now I'm going to click on OK. And now it's going to migrate InTouch. So let's give it a second while it does it. It's a pretty small application, so hopefully it won't take too long here. And in the meantime, I am running a little bit behind. It's 11:37. I'm almost done here, so just hang tight, guys. And feel free to ask questions in the chat. My coworker Alconsa will answer them as we go. Sorry, now it's migrating. Let's give it a second. And it's opening Window Maker, the development environment of this application in 2023. And you can see it's giving us a status update there on the conversion of the windows. And there you go. So now I have the new application in 2023. And I can check that it was, upgraded successfully if I go back to the InTouch application manager. And oh, sorry, let's close this first. And we're going to open the application manager and verify the version number of this application. So I can go ahead and click on the little ellipses here and click on properties. And under here, you can see version number. It says 23.0.000. That's version 2023. So I'm able to confirm that it was successfully converted to the new version of the software. So now I'm going to open it again. And just going to show you guys a couple more things and we can wrap this up here. Quickly wanted to show you guys the conversion of industrial graphics. It's pretty easy. Let's open the application again here in Window Maker. And so on the left side, what we can do here, and actually it's going to require me to close the windows, but I can go ahead and click on close. And then what I can do is right click, and then you'll see an option to convert to industrial graphics. So if I click on it, oh, I got to close the windows first. There you go. So now I'm going to convert to industrial graphics. Let's go ahead and select all. Almost done here. There you go. Window conversion is done. So now on the right side, you'll see an industrial graphics box right here. And you can see the windows that were converted because there's a new folder called tag_test, which was the name of my application. And then you can see the new industrial graphics right there. So that's how easy it is to convert, right? And remember, this is a required step if you are using the InTouch web client. All right, so it's 11:39. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up here. Just gonna make sure that all the questions were answered in the Q&A. Let's see. I see Alcanza is typing an answer to how long do upgrades and migrations take? So Alcanza will be typing out the answer here. Another attendee asked, is InTouch 2023 the latest release? Yes, it's the latest release. It was released a few months ago, I believe August 2022. Excuse me. But remember that Aviva is constantly, releasing new patches and new updates. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a new minor update coming up here shortly. Probably 2023 R2.
Peter, if you don't mind, can I answer?
Sure.
Can I answer the first question live? Sure. For the question regarding the upgrades and migrations, how long do they take? As you saw now, Pierre did it in just a few minutes. Depends on the size and the version of the application that you have, and it also depends on how heavy on scripting your application is. So the migration part will be triggered automatically by the software itself. Once you try to open that application in a newer version, that usually takes a few minutes. I personally haven't seen it taking longer than half an hour. But then after that, you need to go through upgrading or converting to industrial graphics. That's another step that you have to do by yourself. And then you also have to make sure that all of your scripts are actually converted. If a specific function that you've used before in a script does not exist or was not is not available in the newer version, usually the software will suggest an alternative, or you're going to have to basically use like a combination of new functions in the newer upgraded version, basically to substitute that script. So again, the answer is the software migration. The migration that the software doesn't usually take long, but then there's extra steps that you have to take care of basically after the fact.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Alcanza. Thanks for all the details. And to add one thing to what Alcanza said too, right? If you are upgrading to 2023, for example, and going through Flex, right? We have unlimited tags, right? With InTouch 2023 through Flex. And so if you have unlimited tags, that sounds great, and that's awesome. But then that just means you might get tag creep, right? And so you might start seeing your applications grow larger and larger, which is the intent. But the larger your application, especially with unlimited tags, right, the more you have to be aware of longer upgrading times, right? Because obviously the larger your volume, the larger your application, the longer it will take.
Mm-hmm.
And someone asked as well about, do historian trends convert to industrial graphics? So you're probably referring to the historian client trends that are embedded on InTouch screens, right? And if that's the case, you will need to convert your InTouch window that hosts the historian client trend object to industrial graphics. So it's just like what I showed you, right? You'll have to right click on the window and then convert to industrial graphics.
Sorry, just to add, same thing applies to the native trend from InTouch. That also converts to industrial graphics. So both types of trends do.
Correct. Yeah. Great point, Alfonso. Thank you. Awesome. Well, that's all the questions that we have right now. But does anyone else have any more questions? We can wait a little bit to see if anyone has any last minute questions, do a little short Q&A session. But it sounds like all questions were answered so far. Let's maybe give it another minute or so. But if you don't have any questions, thanks for joining, and feel free to drop off, and I'll see you guys next time. And oh yeah, and as a reminder, right, I mentioned InTouch for System Platform. We will have a System Platform upgrade webinar in July that Kyle sent the link for in the chat. So I encourage you guys to attend that one as well. So we have another question here from Henry. How can we get a copy of the upgrade matrix? Yeah, let me see if I can actually. Okay, I can't share images in the chat. So it's Henry, I can email it to you individually. But as a general rule of thumb, those upgrade matrices are available in the README. So the one that I showed as an example is in the InTouch 2023 README. So you can find that online. You can find that on our software support website, but I'll send it to you individually as well.